I'm Gary Kelley. I'm with RE/MAX Executive Realty, and we are here today to talk about the home buying experience. I'm joined by some other industry professionals that I'd like to introduce. I'll start with the top left on my screen, which is Mike Flanagan with Mortgage Unity. Mike?
Hi, how's everybody going? I'm Mike Flanagan. I'm the principal broker owner with Mortgage Unity. We're a full service residential mortgage brokerage. We offer just about every type of mortgage product there is.
Thanks, Mike. We'll go on to, there's another Mike in the call. Let's go on to the other Mike, Michael Robbins, Crowley, Cummings.
Absolutely. I'm Michael Robbins with Crowley and Cummings. I've been practicing exclusively residential and commercial real estate law for this is 20 years now. Licensed in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and I can also practice in New Hampshire and Maine with respect to real estate.
Rounding out the round table, so to speak, even though it looks more like squares to me, is Jamie Karrat of Ripple Effect Insurance. Jamie?
Good morning. Hi, I'm Jamie Karrat with Ripple Effect Insurance. I am located in Douglas, Massachusetts. However, our insurance agency services all of the New England states, as well as Florida and also randomly Tennessee.
Randomly Tennessee.
Randomly.
I'll make sure that my friends in Tennessee get a copy of this. So I'm Gary Kelley with RE/MAX, and one of the things that happens when people decide to buy a house is they often make a phone call to the local real estate agent, or some friend refers them, whatever, and they say, hey, I'd like to buy a house. And, you know, we're all excited when that call comes. We want to go out and we want to show them properties and really help them find their next home. That's not the first question, though. The first question really becomes, so what can you pay? What can you afford? How are you going to pay for this? You know, there are people that have cash that goes into one category. You know, maybe mommy, daddy have some cash, or maybe they've done some Bitcoining and they've got some cash. But most of the time, it ends up with someone looking for a mortgage of some kind. And so before we want to spend a lot of time showing people properties, we want to understand what their financial prowess is. And so we would send them to Mike Flanagan, who can have a further discussion with them about that. Mike, can you walk through what happens when you get that call from us?
Yeah, absolutely. So someone reaches out to us, you know, they want to find out what they can afford. They want to find out how much home they can buy. They want to find out what fits in their budget. Oftentimes, you're right, Gary, they come to you, they find this beautiful house on the internet, let's go buy it. They haven't done a lot of research on what it's going to take for down payment, what their income can support, what type of products their credit profile lends them to. So we take all of that data and we turn around and we advise the client on their best options. The key word there being advised. Right now, the fundamental issue, I believe, in the mortgage marketplace is misinformation. What the client is going to try to get and what they need to get is largely going to be dictated by their situation. And that's really important to you, Gary, because we need to make sure they know and understand their situation. We have the moniker for this character in everybody's life. We call him Uncle Bob in our office. And everybody has Uncle Bob that tells them they want to do X, Y, and Z, and this is the way that you do it. And Uncle Bob's a real problem for first-time home buyers because his situation is likely very, very different from the home buyer. His resources are almost assuredly very, very different from the home buyer. And Uncle Bob is not in tune with today's marketplace. He knows what works for Uncle Bob, but he doesn't know what works for Jamie or Mike Flanagan. So we take all of that and we try to, you know, we're in the advisory and the expectation management business. And that's where Gary, you know, the real estate agent, really needs our support.
Now, I think it's amazing to enter into those kinds of conversations with someone and have them say, well, my Uncle Bob said this, or conversely, often it's the parents, or, you know, I know someone who just bought a house and this is what they did, without any of the background on what their specific situation was. And it makes it somewhat awkward because you have to take time to educate the consumer on what they're capable of doing. It really it's interesting, but it doesn't necessarily matter what their friend down the street was able to do.
I can't stress that enough. And, when we get into my specific roundtable about the mortgage process, that is what most of my time is spent talking about. Listen, mortgage professionals that sell products sell low rates, quick turn times, access to me, and good technology. Okay. As far as Mortgage Unity and my staff and my team is concerned, those are your natural rights now. Okay. Those aren't things to go out and celebrate. Those are the things that if you have those things, congratulations, you can enter the mortgage industry. Okay. If you don't have any of those things, you're not a player. Okay. So where do we need to differentiate? We need to be able to offer those services, but also advise the client to make sure they're getting in the product that meets their needs, to make sure what they're trying to do jives with their goals more than anything. And that often is where we run into a lot of friction. What they're asking for is either impractical or does not meet with their goals. And that's where the real estate agents can get frustrated, the mortgage professionals can get frustrated. And if it makes it to Mike Robbins and the attorneys, I assure you, he will be extremely frustrated. So, because that's where all of these problems find them, manifest themselves if they get left unattended.
I think that those are good words of advice, Mike. It's just so amazing to me that people will start out on the purchase of what is typically the largest thing that they'll ever buy in their lives. And they're just really very ill-informed. And it becomes dangerous. I never want to have clients coming back and saying things to me like, I need to sell the house because I can't afford it. That's sad, that's scary. I like to say my heart bleeds on that kind of thing. Hopefully my heart bleeds a lot, but it's just one of those things where you want people to make a good decision. And I'll say to people, you'll get approved for a larger mortgage than you ever should sign up for. Because I want them to make sure that they're comfortable with not only with what the mortgage company and the statistics say, but also what they're comfortable with writing a check out every month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And it's understanding that ahead of time makes the process go so much smoother, makes everything a lot less stressful. We can get all of those things out very quickly. Listen, point and click mortgage, your Rocket Mortgage, it's a great tool. We have all of the resources that Rocket Mortgage does. Okay. We have the same technology. We have the same resources, but you also get us. You also get our advisory. We also can offer better pricing than those, in general, we can offer better pricing than those point and click retailers, because all that advertising, all of that costs a lot of money. And so we would rather put our resources in managing the client, their goals, and making sure everything works together.
How many different mortgage types can you represent, Mike? And what I mean by that is sometimes people will go to a bank and the bank will have a handful of different mortgage types that they can sell because that's what the bank has. You're a little bit different in the sense that you've got a much deeper, I'm going to say, bench of players that you can bring into the table.
Right. So we're an independent mortgage broker. I believe currently we're authorized to originate loans on behalf of 15 to 17 lenders. It will vary. Sometimes we roll someone off that doesn't have a product that we need, or their pricing's not competitive, and we bring on somebody new. We have all of your standard products, your conventional, your government, FHA, USDA, VA. And we also have a lot of what's called non-QM. These are loans that don't fit the marketplace. Back in the day, these were called subprime. Now they're called non-qualified mortgages or non-QM, and they're a lot more strict than those old products used to be. But there are some different things out there, one-off products, if people have a niche need. People hear broker, they think middleman, they think more costs, and that's absolutely not true, specifically in the mortgage space. People think going direct is a savings, and that's true when you're going to something where you need to get to the manufacturer and you want to buy direct from the manufacturer. In mortgages, we're the manufacturers. Okay, we are the originators. We are the people that assemble these mortgages and put them together. So I have, as a broker, a massive advantage where I can shop pricing for several different lenders on any given day. We can shop product from several different lenders any day. And we keep a pretty in-depth network of local banks that we can refer in and out of that we might not even be able to broker to, but we know has the product that you need and will, refer you out there at no compensation to ourselves, because there is going to be a right product for you. And that's what, we try to always get the client to.
So what I get from someone like yourself is typically a pre-approval saying that Sally Sweetwater can buy a condo for $100,000 and they have to put down 20%, blah, blah, blah. And those are my, my hunting papers to start to try to find a property.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the client is pre-approved for what they're looking for. They bring you that house, Gary. Hey, this is the one I want to go see. This is the one that I want to, investigate, go to an open house, whatever the case is. We're going to make sure that that fits in their, their approval box, make sure it fits within what they can qualify for. And then we'll turn around and give that letter to you so that whoever is selling that house knows that they, have been vetted out and done their research. We tend to go through a lot of credit and income documentation, we make sure that all the documentation is generally ready up front as well, because what you put into the application on Rocket Mortgage is largely going to dictate what you can do. I have this conversation a lot. 90% of my borrowers have no idea what they make for a living. Just think about that. 90% of the self-input income on a application, maybe higher, is inaccurate, incorrect. And so that is one of the first building blocks of a pre-approval. So if someone's not vetting that out and not making sure that those income calculations are correct, I would guess 90% of the applications that people put in are incorrect, and they're running around therefore with incorrect pre-approvals. And Gary, I don't need to ask you, what is the operational burn for someone like you if you run around with a client for weekend after weekend and they aren't pre-approved for the loan, they don't qualify for the loan that they represent?
Well, I will tend to, it's a personal decision. Every agent can do this differently. I will tend to show someone a property or two if they're not pre-approved so that they start to get a feel for it. But when it gets much beyond that, I will say, you really need to get pre-approved because I don't know what they can afford. I just don't. Okay. And I also prefer mortgage providers that are local, people that I can sit across the table from, people that I can go in and say, what the heck's really going on? And that makes a big difference for us, because if you're dealing with an 800 call center somewhere, you may not be able to reach someone, or you're in a 24-hour return cycle on phone calls, and that can be a problem. When it comes to the real estate side, we will put together a search for someone on MLS, and that way anything that comes on MLS, they will instantly be notified of, and that we find beneficial for folks so that they know everything that's going on in the marketplace at any point in time. That is important. But we also have a network of other agents that we talk to, Cummings soon, groups, etc., so that we start to have a sense of what is coming down the pipeline. And that's helpful because particularly in the market that we are just emerging from, where it was hot, houses selling in a nanosecond, that kind of thing, having a leg up on others, frankly, is a benefit of using a realtor as opposed to just sitting back and looking at what comes on the market and all that kind of thing. So we use the multiple listing service, but we also want to make sure that we're tied into that local community of people that are indicating here's what's coming, etc. There are people that like things like Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, etc. My personal experience is that Zillow, who interestingly is no longer just a search portal, they're a full brokerage. They've been out buying houses, and then they decided that they weren't going to buy houses because what they were buying for was their own estimate of the house, and they found out that that was wrong. So there's a number of issues that come out with Zillow. I happen to think that Realtor.com gives a more accurate representation of what's on the MLS. And so I tend to steer people there. But we also have tools that we use to put information in front of people that aggregate other information. For example, here's a house, it's a nice looking house. Here's all the standard listing pictures. And oh, by the way, here's the information on the schools that are around that house. That's often something that's important to a buyer, is to understand the schools. As we start to go down that path of looking at a house and doing due diligence, it's not uncommon for me to pull in an attorney like Michael Robbins and say, hey, listen, they have this weird trust that was set up. You think this is going to be a problem for us getting to close? Or Jamie Karrat, this house has knob and tube wiring. Now, I've done enough of these that I know that you can get insurance for knob and tube wiring, but it's not going to be the same price as a house that doesn't have knob and tube. So the question will come to Jamie, hey, can you insure this? Well, yeah, but it's going to be a matter of how much. And we want to understand those numbers. Jamie, anything you'd add to that?
No, that's absolutely right. I'm sort of the bow on the package, if you will. By the time, a new home buyer has come to me, they've already talked to Michael Robbins, they've talked to Mike Flanagan, they've been working with you, Gary, for a long time. And everybody's situation is different. Like Mike said, it's not a one size fits all. He's able to talk to a various number of lenders to find out what works best. And I do the same thing. We are independent, so I have access to multiple carriers, and they all have different appetites. They're all looking for different things that fit their niche, and they all have things that they either will or they won't insure. Knob and tube is a great example of that, Gary. That's, for those people that don't know, a very antiquated electrical system. It's common in older homes, but it's also a fire hazard. So a lot of insurance carriers take issue with that because it's not something they're willing to write. We have markets for it. It's typically more expensive, and your overall coverage is going to be much less.
Jamie, let me interject for 1 second on that.
Yeah.
Approximately how much more would you guess a knob and tube insurance policy is? Is it double? Is it triple, quadruple? Because we've seen it be extensively more than a normal policy.
I'd say anywhere between 50% to 100% more.
Right. And so we've kind of stumbled across a reason that the four of us are on this call and on this intro to the mortgage process, and the real estate process in general. Sorry, I'm obviously going to go self-biased there, but conversations like these need to be had, because if that insurance policy is twice as expensive as we're accounting for, that goes into affordability. And then that goes back to Gary, and Gary might be showing them a house now that they can't afford. It's not as simple as push button, get mortgage. Okay. It's push button, apply for mortgage. And then professionals like us need to communicate to get the mortgage. Sorry to cut you off, Jamie.
Nope, that's okay. And you hit the nail on the head. And that's one of the great things about working with someone local. When I say local, it doesn't mean they have to be, in your town, but somebody who actually has their feet on the ground, preferably maybe in the state or at least the region. Stay away from the 1-800s, just because they're not going to specialize in your state and where your home is. And chances are they don't have access to the multitude of carriers that a local person would. In insurance, though, you're able to budget and we can work with your needs. It's not the place to cut corners. When you're going out to look for a new house, you're not going to buy one because it's the cheapest. You're out buying a house that has certain features and certain things that you're looking for. And you should think of your insurance policy the same way. There's coverages that I would put on a policy for somebody who has oil heat that you don't need if you have gas heat. And same thing, if there's a swimming pool, a trampoline, if you have pets, those are all things that need to be taken into consideration. So within those parameters, I'm able to take a look at the different companies, take into consideration those special features that apply to you in your home, and get you the best rate and the best coverage.
It's interesting you bring up oil. I've actually known someone who had an oil tank leak, and it became a hazardous materials cleanup of the yard. And pulling off soil and everything else. And had she not had appropriate coverage in her house, it could have financially devastated her. No question about it. And it's important to have that in place. So when we put together an offer, there are contingencies that go along with it. We normally put in the dollar amount, and then we put in the closing time frame and contingencies. Some contingencies might be, are they going to get a mortgage? We've been talking about getting a mortgage, but if you're a cash buyer, you may not need to do that. Is there an appraisal? If you are buying a property and getting a mortgage, the chances are good that the mortgage company is going to want to have an appraisal because they don't want to put more money out than the property's worth. There are some programs that will allow Mr. Flanagan to say, yeah, we can get we can go buy the appraisal on this one because it's going to be so clear where it is, or if you're putting down enough money that it doesn't really matter. But that's another contingency. Inspection. I really don't like it when someone buys a house and doesn't have an inspection, because I think that they're buying something that they can't even take for a test drive. And you wouldn't buy a car without doing a test drive. You certainly want to have an inspection on the house. However, when there are so few things that you can use to distinguish yourself, not doing an inspection becomes one of the options that gets discussed. Or do you do an inspection and say, we'll eat the first $5,000 in any inspection issues that come out? Those are the types of things that go on. Home sale or home purchase. If there is someone that is in the process of buying a home and they need to sell their house, that needs to be called out, or otherwise you're going to be in a situation of trying to carry two houses, and you may not be able to do that financially. Those things come up all the time. No seller wants to accept an offer that has a home sale contingency for the buyer, but it happens a lot. Okay, so that's where the real estate agent puts together the offer and it gets accepted, and then that gets turned over to the attorney, who will then pretty it up and make it legal and correct all of the errors that the real estate agents have made. Michael, why don't you talk to that for a second?
It's interesting because, the offer is a contract, and it's a legally binding contract. And it's always important for whether it's the buyers or the seller to understand what they're signing. All the time with a very fast-paced society now, where they just want to sign something electronically on their phone. And I really like to back things off just a moment and say, listen, this is a contract for hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is typically the largest purchase that most people make. I believe that real estate's a key to building wealth. And it's really important for the parties to understand that this is a very large financial contract. And people will say all the time, well, this is a standard. Okay, well, what does standard mean? What are your rights, your risks, and your responsibilities? So the offer will have typically the sellers, it has to have the parties, the amount, the closing date, and any contingencies. And then what happens in Massachusetts is we go from offer typically to home inspection. There's like a 2-week period typically for inspections. And then we go to what's called going to contract, which is the final, more complete version. And it's not about the realtors getting it right or wrong. It's about having more details. A 2-page document for sometimes millions of dollars typically is pretty inadequate. And those, to play on Mike's conversation of click here, click there, I don't think that really works well when you're dealing with dollar values of that size and the impact on people's lives. And the litigation that I don't handle litigation, but when I refer out litigation time and time and time again, it's, well, did you read this? No, I just clicked here and clicked there. And I have a completely separate role to play. I have 2 distinct and separate roles that are dovetailed together. The first is if Jamie's buying a house, my job is to review that contract with her. Typically what we do is I'm notified once there's an accepted offer. And then typically the seller's attorney will prepare a full draft agreement. I'll send that to Jamie. We'll have a Zoom review of that purchase and sale agreement. We typically take about 40 minutes to go through those provisions. And it's just not like, oh yeah, here's the price. Is this right? Oh, you're all set to sign. No, there are lots of conditions and provisions that need to get reviewed. And so she understands what her rights, risks, and responsibilities are. I say time and again, the legal condition for property delivery in Massachusetts is broom swept, which is really low. And you wonder if they even bothered to do that, meaning the sellers. And it's a situation where I talk about that with their buyers right at purchase and sale to set those expectations. And so when they're purchasing their home, when they show up and they see it's kind of a mess, they're not so disappointed. And that's less of a contract provision, but just a real life provision. Or if you're buying new construction, understanding that your closing date is going to get moved. And understanding what your financing commitment date. Typically, especially with first-time buyers, this is the first time they've ever spoken to an attorney. They have had typically no interactions with an attorney prior. And my job is to be a resource and an advocate to those buyers. And it's my role to say, hey, listen, this is what's important. This is what's not. These are where the issues are going to come from. And this is what the next steps are for us to have a successful purchase. The second role that I have once the purchase and sale gets signed is in conjunction with Mike and his team. They need to get what's called title. And I always use the refrain from old Westerns, like, oh, this deed isn't worth the paper that it was printed on. And what happens is a deed is a legal document transferring rights of ownership from one party, the seller, to the buyer. And my job is to ensure that the title to that property is what's called good, clean, and marketable. Because if Jamie buys a house and that has a former owner tax lien on it, or let's say they owe taxes to the IRS, even though Jamie didn't incur that debt obligation, that lien runs with the property, not with the person. And my job is to ensure that there are no such liens or issues. I have a situation right now, and the owner only owns a third interest to this house. There's two missing interests because it was sold out of an estate. They didn't use an attorney because it was a family deal, and they've had it for 20 years. We have to go to court for an action for what's called quiet title. And it's a situation where it's a gigantic problem, but this is what happens. You need to have good title so the ownership can transfer to Jamie and that the bank's interest is secured and that mortgage gets recorded. And that's part of what I do is I act like an escrow agent in other states, and I handle all the finances with respect to the seller's money, the buyer's money, the deposits. And I ensure that the title is good, clean, and marketable for both the buyer and the lender. I handle the closing. So I'll be meeting with the buyers to sign their paperwork and then record those legal documents and make distributions. So my first role is to be a contract attorney to review those with the buyer. And then my second role is to be a title and closing attorney for the parties involved. And those are my roles and responsibilities. But I have a legal duty exclusively to the buyer. At closing, I wear two hats, both bank and buyer, because those interests align. But I always say, I'm in the how it is business. If the buyer doesn't want to buy the house, or if the seller doesn't want to sell the house, if there's issues, they can come to me confidentially, discuss those, and I can give them the best advice that I can.
I always tell my clients, Michael, because we're, you and I work together closely during the transactional process, and people are intimidated by attorneys. And from a mortgage standpoint, I need settlement. I need someone to conduct the settlement of the transaction. And I let my clients know that you're in the protection and cover their back business for them. And I do business in both attorney states and title states. And title states think they're so easy and they're so clean and they're so much, more streamlined. And that's where we run into a lot of issues, because they're only focused on settlement. They're not focused on protection and protecting the client. How long have you done this, Michael?
20 years.
How often do you see something new come up that you go, haven't seen that happen?
Just this third interest, missing interest that came up. It like I gave you the 10,000 foot view. It is so complicated. I've worked on this for hours, and it's interesting that you mentioned I work in title states as well, as opposed to attorney states. If I was a consumer, sincerely, if my son, my daughter, my niece, my nephew was buying a home, I go, you want to be in an attorney state. And it's not for, more business for me. I have the amount of volume that I have with issues as it results to states that they go right to contract. Rhode Island, the offer is the purchase and sale. Almost every single one of my legal disputes over deposits are in states that go right to purchase and sale. I've been at the depositions. Did you read this? No. Did you have an attorney read this? No. I just clicked here, clicked there. Didn't even bother. And there's this race to get these documents signed as if it has to be done within the next 5 minutes. And I just go, you just signed a $50,000 deposit that's non-refundable. Well, I didn't read that. No one told me. Oops. I guess it's not so standard then. Yeah. And I like the process in Massachusetts. I like the two-step process as opposed to the milk's already out of the cow. You're done. And there'll be serious issues. And I go, I can't help you. You've already signed the contract. I didn't know. I didn't read it. And I always say in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, I don't care if it's the offer. Give me a call. Let's go through it together. It's the fence at the top of the hill versus the ambulance at the bottom. And that's really where I try to be a resource to Gary. If it's on a weekend or an evening, if it's time sensitive, let's get it done. Because I always say real estate happens now. And everybody on this call today has flex schedules, meaning, hey, when the work's in, that's when we work. And when we have time off, that's when we take the time off. But it's a situation where we need to be available to those clients, and I'm happy to be available because they just don't understand what they're signing. And that's my job, is to say, hey, listen, let's slow this down.
I think we should surmise this in that when you're a consumer and you want to buy your first home or you want to buy your next home, it all comes down, especially in a hyper competitive marketplace like this, is efficiency and accuracy. And we have to blend those things and make sure that what is being done efficiently and it's being done accurately. That's why Jamie is equally important on this call to me as Mike Robbins is. And my business would not have any clients if Gary didn't do what he did. It's all symbiotic and it all works together. You can't, the company's called Mortgage Unity for a reason. And the reason is that all of these parties need to pull together and work for you and work with you for your interest. And too often in this, push button, get mortgage has their, they want to close, they want to get as many clients in as fast as they can. They want to get them out the door as fast as they can. Well, that doesn't really work for Gary. Trust me, talk to realtors, see how much they love those rocket mortgage approvals. If you're running around with one of those and you're not getting offers accepted, there's likely a reason. We're in the reputation business. And Mike Robbins, how many do you see these deals come together where you look at the agent and the lender and you go, oh, here we go.
Oh, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. And
I think that's why it's important as a consumer begins to go down this process that they look at not only who's the mortgage dude and who's the real estate person going to be, but who's the lawyer going to be. And as someone said earlier, you may not ever have met a real estate attorney. Insurance definitely comes to play in this because you need to have your eyes open. So in my mind, real estate is a team sport. And having a team where it's a group of people that work together regularly I'm not going to say that I know anything about mortgages, but I know on certain topics how Mike Flanagan's going to finish a line. And I know the same thing with Jamie. Okay. You've got to make sure, I think it's important to work with, make it a team sport as opposed to individuals.
That's exactly right, Gary. And I will follow up kind of on the point and click, because we've all hit upon that. With respect to Jamie, what she said, we were talking about the oil. I forget the company that, get the insurance that you need. I think most consumers have no idea what they need. So having the consumer determine what they need, I think, is a real absence of coverage. I staggered when I always see those commercials, because if you don't know what's going on, yeah, I want the minimum possible. And that's where you want to have someone who can look at your individual situation locally and be able to apply and provide the best coverages possible at the best price, instead of having the consumer who doesn't know what they necessarily need make those choices.
And maybe more importantly, Michael, they're not taught this in school. We're not taught this in school. You're being taught and you're being educated if you're going to your sphere or your network. But your personal finances they're like a fingerprint to you. You're taking advice from people that know nothing about your personal finances.
Bob.
Uncle Bob, exactly. And you're taking advice from people that don't know anything about your situation. And so, again, efficiency and accuracy, that's what I'm here for. That helps Gary do his job. Michael has my back, and I know I can get the accurate stuff I need when Jamie has the right coverage. And if someone down the line, their pipes explode and they have massive water damage, or a flood happens and they, let flood coverage lapse or something like that, they call us, they call me, you know what I mean? And I know immediately that doesn't happen with Jamie's clients. If I have a Geico client, they call me. If I have a Jamie client, a Ripple Effect client, I don't hear from them when those things happen, because they have someone in their corner to work with. And I think we'll get into more details on this as we each do our own independent session on this. We're going to follow them up, because I think there's a lot that you need to hear from Gary. There's a lot you need to hear from Jamie and Michael and myself, and a lot about how we do business. Again, it's our fingerprint, and it needs to jive with you, the client, or you, the partner that's working with us. And I appreciate this time and Gary for pulling this together, because it's the information. There's a fundamental flaw in how the information is getting out there, and we want to start correcting that.
We're down to parting words as we look at the clock and start to say we're running out of time. Jamie, I want to let you go. Anything you'd like to add?
No, but I think, we've talked about the Uncle Bobs, again, touching on them. They've come to me. I've heard the same thing as Mike says. It's the same. I think we're all dealing with the same struggle. So it's the Uncle Bobs, it's the 1-800s, and just emphasizing how important it is to talk to somebody who is local. That's why we're licensed professionals. It's our job to determine what you need, give you the options, and ultimately educate you on the decisions that you're making. It's not one size fits all.
Attorney Robbins, any parting words from you?
Don't sign a contract for hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions without having an attorney look at it. It's pretty straightforward. Don't click here. Give me a call.
Mr. Flanagan, parting words.
I'll say we ask questions, we don't make assumptions. Okay, so we're gonna get the information we need to make those, make those recommendations and help advise you. Uncle Bob's advice is coming from a place of love. Okay, I swear it is. He just hasn't asked enough questions and maybe doesn't know enough about the modern financial principles at play.
My parting words are thank you for watching, but also real estate is a team sport. You want to make sure you have the best team in your corner as you begin down the path. And I think the people on this call are a great example of that. We are going to follow this up with some more detailed sessions, but we wanted to whet your appetite, and we will indicate how to reach the folks on the call at the end. So thank you all for participating on the call, and thank you all who have attended, and good luck in your house hunt.